Hi, I'm Randy Lubin. I'm the designer of StorySynth, and today I'm going to share a quick tour of different extensions and custom options that you can include with your StorySynth games. So you can find all of this information by going to storysynth.org and then clicking Guide. That'll take you to the main documentation page, and on the left you can click down to information on just designing in general, formats and templates, custom options, extensions, and more. So we're going to start by looking at extensions. Extensions are big chunks of extra functionality that you can add to your game with just one row in your Google Sheet. So let's just walk through what a few of those might look like. There's a link to a sandbox demo that just shows all the current extensions listed one after the other after the other. So in this sandbox, and this isn't tied to a specific format, first there's this static box. That's just a way to include a box with content that's always going to be visible. Then there's player turn order, and if you're playing a game mode like Shuffled, as you move through the cards, it'll automatically move through the turn order. I'll show you that now with Clash at Ikara. So here's the turn order down here, and as I click through the cards, it auto-advances with whoever's turn it is. Now let's say you wanted to skip somebody's turn or jump to a different person's turn. You can just click their name, and it will update automatically, and then you can just keep clicking. And it'll remember where you were and just keep moving to the next player. You can also edit the names if you want. Then you can use player names here. You can also use this for the names of heroes or archetypes or any other information that you want cycled through. The next extension that we'll look at is it's called plus minus, and it's a way of updating game state as time goes on. So you can see in this case there's three different resources for a ship, and you can hit the plus or minus button to increase or decrease them. And the way this works, like everything in StorySynth, is that anyone who's at the same URL will see the same thing at the same time. So if I hit plus here, everyone who's on the same page will also see that number increase. The next type of extension is editable list. So here I can just add fourth thing, and it shows up, and I can edit it and delete it, and it's going to be visible to everyone else. So that's helpful for keeping track of a small list of items. And if you want, depending on the type of thing you're building, you can have multiple editable lists, and there can be as many lists as you want. So in this case, there's one list for locations and another for allies. If I keep scrolling down, the next type of extension is a dice roller. So fairly basic, just enter the number of dice you want to roll, and it will roll them. So I could say 2d6 and 1d10, and it'll roll that. And yeah, so you get a sense of how it works. Very, very basic, not particularly stylized, but functional. So if you want a dice roller on your page, easy to add. Likewise, you can add a standard deck of cards. So let me reshuffle, and then I can draw, and it keeps track of past draws. So for certain types of games that have a quick reference that say, oh, okay, if you draw the 5 of clubs, do something specific, totally compatible here. And the final extension to show, or second to final actually, is a journal entry. So very good for solo games, although there's plenty of things you might want to track here. This is a public log, so everybody who's at the same URL will see, everyone who's playing this game session will see all the same entries. It's not a private entry, but super easy. Just type the entry, hit post, it's posted, and of course you can edit it and delete it. And that's the quick tour of the basic ways of using extensions. There's one slightly fancier one, and that is you can create a Hex Flower and then embed that Hex Flower within a different game. And so let me jump to that right now, I believe. Here we go, yeah. So in this case, you have a shuffled game, just clicking through just like normal shuffled, but underneath it is a Hex Flower. And it's pretty cool how that works. You can still regenerate, move, just works like the normal Hex Flower format. And then you can have other extensions below it too, and that's totally fine. And the way that one works is, well, I'll show you in the spreadsheet. There's a row that says Hex Flower as extension, and then has a link to the spreadsheet for that Hex Flower. So you actually have to design your game, in that case, in two different spreadsheets. All the extensions have their own slightly different way of formatting themselves. or including the default information if you want the game to start with some information populated. If you go to the extensions page of the documentation, it'll contain all the information that you need to be able to incorporate it into your game. Oh, and most of the extensions have good ways of customizing the titles. So you can change this from standard journal entries to something else, or likewise you can change this from editable list to ship inventory, or player turn order can become, well, in this case, the heroes. So that's it for extensions. And again, extensions are a way to include a chunk of new functionality into your game. I'm always keen to hear requests for new extensions. So if there's something you'd love your game to be able to do that you think other games would benefit for, please reach out and let me know. But for now, let's continue on and talk about custom options. So custom options don't add a whole new chunk of functionality usually, but they add in little ways of tweaking and customizing the game to suit your needs. So there is a page in the guide called custom options, and there are a bunch of different types of custom options. So let's just walk through a few of them now, but I'll leave it to you to sort of read through the rest. So the first chunk are metadata options, and metadata here refers to information about the game that will show up on the game launch page. So this is how people can create new sessions of your game. And so here we have a title, a byline, and then an option to create a session. In some games underneath that, you also have a blurb, which is very helpful for players who want to get a little context for what they're about to jump into or launch. And so those are controlled by game title and byline, and blurb would be its own line here. Other custom options you can look into, so there's tons to mess with visual style. And the easiest thing you can do is just use the style template option. So for these, you just say option, the name of the option, and then the value. So in this case, option, style template, and you can use cyberpunk or vaporwave, fantasy, dark, light. So to see that in action, so right now this is using the dark template. If I take this and update this from dark to cyberpunk, and then refresh the page, suddenly it's in the cyberpunk theme. Very simple, and let me just change this back, and refresh, and it's back to dark. So you have a few of these basic templates to start with. If you have a request for more, please let us know. Credit to Raftamika for coming up with these style templates. If you want to get more custom, that's totally okay too. So instead of using style template, use style, and then in the next cell to the right, you can put in as much complex CSS as you want if you know CSS, and just style every element of the page. You can really make it look radically different than any of the defaults. I have a list here of some of the classes that you might want to use to grab a hold of. Each format has its own slightly different aspects to it, so things might differ from format to format. You can always inspect the page and look, or you can ask me to add extra classes on if you just want an easier way to point to just a specific part of the page. That's all if you know CSS or want to be using CSS. If you don't worry about it. Just use the basic defaults. Or if you want sort of a 101 intro to CSS tutorial, happy to help out and point you in the right direction. Other things I can point to. So let's see. For the game launcher itself, game launcher being this page here, not the game itself, but the page that creates a new session, there's a handful of things you can do. You can set a password. Very helpful if you only want certain playtesters to be able to access, or have it be an early access tied to crowdfunding. You can also add a license, although you can of course also do that in the blurb. You can add images is another thing, and this is not just for the game launcher, but for all for the game session itself. So you can add a cover image that does show up on the game launcher page, but it'll also be the first card for formats that have cards. And then you also have you can add background images to the card, and that background image can be across the entire card, which is nice if you want a subtle paper texture. I think I have that in Clash at Akara. And you could also do just along the bottom. So for example, in the game Around the Realm, I have a little wave along the bottom of the screen. The other things you can do, you can have lots of customizations of the buttons. So the buttons are, I'm trying to think of the right example here. So the menu button color is showing up here. Right now it's just using the default dark theme, but if you want to change that color in particular, there's a fairly straightforward way of doing that. You don't even need to use CSS. You can just put in the common web color name or put in the hex code of the hex color, and it'll change the menu color. Helpful for when you're customizing the background, and also on an easy way of making sure the menu stands out. Other custom options for certain formats, not necessarily the formats here. They're actually here. I'll get to that later. You can choose to hide a header or show a header that might appear above the card in certain formats. It depends on the format. You can have instructions progress bar for certain formats. So as you're clicking through just the instruction section, you can let people know how many cards left. I found that to be very helpful because players sometimes don't know, like, am I almost done with the instructions? Am I just at the beginning? And that lack of knowing where people are in context can make players a little uneasy. So you can put them at ease by saying, oh, cool, the bar is slowly filling up. We know we're, halfway there. We know we're almost at the end of the instructions. And you can just set how many cards the instructions are, even if the cards happen to involve multiple decks. But typically you'll only have one deck full of instructions. Let's see. Finally, there's options for Facilitator Mode. That hides certain buttons from players. So you can share the link out, and players who are not at the Facilitator link will only be able to sort of read what's going on and not be able to jump ahead or reshuffle or restart the game. There's a handful of other things I won't get into here that are just nice little tweaks for certain use cases. Almost all of these have come from folks who have requested them for a specific game or context. There's also ways to relabel things. So for instance, in the menu, there's usually last card options. Sometimes that's next deck. All of those buttons can be relabeled, so make it fit within the theme of your game. And finally, there are modals. Modals are big pop-ups that have extra context for players. So if you want to include like how to play or how to do a good job being in character or how to embellish or whatever it might be, a quick reference, modals are an excellent way of doing that. And you get them, you menu and then the name of your modal, and they'll just pop up and cover the screen just for the player who's looking at it. It won't do it for all players on the same session. So you can quickly reference the rules without having to disrupt anyone else. Those are modals. And I'm just going to keep scrolling and see if there's anything else worth calling out. Those are the big ones. The other thing, of course, I'll call out is monetization. So right now we've teamed up with Big Bad Con to give out a bunch of micro grants to designers to create new games that take advantage of web monetization. Web monetization is still in its early days, but the idea is that players can send a stream of micro payments to game designers in order to play their games on StorySynth. Talking, pennies for an hour of playtime, but just a steady stream of fractions of a cent or a cent over time. And to set up the monetization, you first need to create a wallet. There's information in here how to do that, and then you put your wallet into the sheet. So when a player visits your game and plays your game with web monetization functionality enabled, they'll know what wallet to send that stream of pennies to. So very cool, very small audience at the moment, but hopefully that audience will keep growing as more people decide to engage with web monetization and explore other ways of paying creators. So anyway, that is a quick tour of the many extensions and options, custom options. Again, extensions, both of which you can find here in this guide on the left by clicking to the relevant area. Extensions are whole chunks of extra mechanics or functionality to add to your game, usually appearing below the game, although you can actually set it to appear above the game if that's what you prefer. And then custom options are more about tweaking specific bits of the page, maybe adding on a little bit of extra customization here or there to really make your game as perfect and as suited to the experience you're trying to create as you'd like. So if you have questions about any of these, please reach out to me. Again, I'm Randy Lubin. You can email info@storysynth.org. You can join our Discord. You can DM me on Twitter @RandyLubin. I'd love to hear it if you need help to make it easier for you and other designers. And if you have extra types of extensions and or custom options, I'd love to hear that too, because my guess is you're not the only one who would benefit from it. So please reach out. I hope you've enjoyed this tour, and I look forward to seeing you designing some cool games on StorySynth. Take care. Bye.